Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Stuzik, and today I'll be presenting on the three important economic concepts that we have covered in class within the last few weeks. So the first one I'll be covering is how one person's spending is another person's income. Secondly, the um, idea of opportunity cost, and lastly, the role of incentives. Now, these three ideas are connected to everyday life and explain a lot about how the economy works. And I'll be giving an explanation or examples of each one to understand more how it is true that it is an everyday life. Okay. So firstly, I'll begin with one person's spending is another person's income. So when we spend money, it doesn't just vanish into thin air, but instead it becomes someone else's income. So this idea comes from the circular flow of income, which depicts how households provide labor to businesses and then employees receive their wages from that. So then employees are able to spend those wages on goods and services for themselves, which becomes revenue for businesses. And then businesses will use that revenue to pay workers and then the suppliers and investors and so on. So yeah, so here it is shown how, yeah, basically households provide labor to firms, which are businesses and corporations, by spending their income on goods and services. And then the firms are able to hire workers and pay them um, from selling goods and services to the households. So it's all just a circular, it just goes around. All right. Now, an example would be if I were to buy a $60 shirt, then part of the $60 that I've spent on that shirt would go to the cashier's wages. And then another part of that would go to the company that made the shirt, maybe if it's whether it's on the rent or on the bills like electricity, water bills, heating, AC, whatever it may be, or all of that all together. And then, um, furthermore, even more of my spending on that particular shirt would go to the suppliers of the materials to make that shirt. So that just shows how money continues to circulate and as those people spend money on themselves. So yes, so uh, as it is seen on the slide, it is a full circle effect. So the individual that got paid from part of the $60 that I used to buy that shirt, they would use their wages to purchase everyday items and pay their rent and um, then the money that they spend would also go to the business that they used it on and it would just go full circle. Okay. So to cover on why this concept of one person's spending is another person's income is important is because if spending increases, businesses would be able to grow and hire more workers, would create more jobs, and it would sustain money flow. But if spending would were to decrease, businesses would suffer and people would lose jobs and they wouldn't have any income. The place just wouldn't be able to stay open simply because of the fact that they can't keep paying for rent or their bills and their workers. So everything would just stop. So yeah, and essentially spending would drive growth and a lack of spending can cause a recession. Now, moving on to opportunity costs. So, opportunity costs is the value of the next best choice that you give up. So, in other words, it is something that is lost when you choose a different option because you can't have both for the most part. So yes, so opportunity cost means the value of the next best alternative that you give up when you make a certain choice. So a common example would be, um, as it is seen here, of a student choosing between attending a class and working a shift or picking up an extra shift at their job. Um, but that is just a basic example. Now, another example that I could provide would be the choice of deciding whether to go to eat out or to cook at home. So, eating out at a restaurant would probably be more convenient and provides just an outing and something to do with friends and family, and you get to go out and socialize and maybe have food that you wouldn't be able to make yourself, or it just most of the time when you go out to restaurants, like the food is definitely way better than if you were to make it on your own, unless you're a really good cook. But for the most part, restaurant food is way better. So, but that would cause to spend more money, especially if you're out with a big group of people and you're gonna order a lot of food. And then, um, I know based just from my experience, what I usually do is if I'm out eating it with a group of people, we just divide the bill evenly and don't pay like for just exactly what you ordered because it just makes it easier than to sit there and calculate exactly how much you spent on your specific dish. So, um, yeah, based on my own personal experience, usually, um, me and my friends would just divide the bill evenly rather than sitting and counting exactly how much you spent on your certain amount of food that you ate. Um, so yeah, you would just spend more money and it would be more convenient. Now, um, on the contrary, you could decide to eat at home and cook your own meal and buy your own ingredients, but that would probably be more time consuming. Um, but it actually would probably be healthier and you wouldn't be spending as much as you would at a restaurant because with the money that you spent at the restaurant, you could put it towards buying your own ingredients and making maybe more food, um, or just you could even probably spend less and make the same dish that you would have at the restaurant. Um, so yeah, essentially it would just not be as convenient, but it would help you to save money and it would probably be healthier. Um, so yeah, that's just a choice that you would have to make. So basically, opportunity cost is the benefit of whichever choice that you didn't take. Okay. So here is more on opportunity cost. So each decision requires weighing the costs and benefits of a situation. So opportunity cost is not always just about the money. It can be time or even experiences, and it encourages the use of decision making to weigh the real cost of choices. So it's basically just making whichever choice is right for you. So to elaborate more and to sum up and understand the explanation of opportunity cost, it's how every decision involves comparing the costs and benefits, and it's more than just about the money, but it can include time and experiences, which helps us to understand the true cost of our choices. Moving on to the role of incentives. So, incentives are rewards or punishments that influence behavior. So, they can be positive, or negative, but an example of a positive incentive would be bonuses and discounts. However, a negative incentive would be fines and taxes. So negative incentives basically take from you because let's say you get a fine, you're paying something for your own choice or decision that you made. But positive incentive, it would be like a reward, something that you receive for doing good or anything like that. Um, so yeah, incentives are powerful because they directly shape the decisions. So incentives are motives or motivations for choices and behaviors, whether it be good or bad. Um, and they shape the decision-making process. All right, so here we have positive and negative incentives. Positive incentive provides a benefit for taking a certain action, as I said earlier. So, positive incentives can motivate an employee to work harder, and in return, they get something positive out of it. So, a positive incentive benefits everything. So, the worker, the employee, the company, and positive incentives would reward an individual for completing something beneficial, which I have said already. Now, a negative incentive is receiving something for like receiving something like a punishment for your actions. So receiving a fine for speeding in a school zone. Um, but this would ensure that the driver would be careful next time so to not receive those consequences. So now, a real world example of an incentive would be um now this is a positive incentive I'm talking about. So a company sets a goal for its team to sell maybe like 100 units of a product in a certain amount of time. Now, if they meet that goal, they would be rewarded with $1,000 in a bonus, whether it be just $1,000 added to their salary, or like $1,000 in like a certain gift card, or maybe $1,000 in a ticket to a trip or like a cruise, whatever it may be. It would just be some sort of bonus that you would receive. So the employee would know that if they meet this target or this goal, that it will ensure that they earn more money and just get something out of it. Because of this incentive, the employee may put in extra hours or improve their working techniques or like collaborate and get together with a colleague to reach this target or goal that was set by their employer or someone above them, like a boss. So eventually the company would benefit from these higher sales that the employees are working on, and it would increase the revenue of the business. And then for that, the employee would get rewarded for their effort. Now, this is an example of positive incentive because it provides motivation to employees and creates a win-win situation for both the employees and the company. And it helps to exercise a habit of setting goals. So it would be like a good habit. Um, Now, as far as a negative incentive would go, an example of a negative incentive could be um, charging for the use of plastic bags at grocery stores. or nowadays it's they charge for any sort of bags, whether it be paper bags or plastic bags, because I know at my job we charge for paper bags as well. Now, even though it is only like a few cents or maybe up to like $1 in some states, I'm not too sure. Um, this would be a negative incentive because it discourages people from using plastic bags, even though, like I said, it is only like maybe a few cents to $1. Um, It essentially just discourages people from using plastic bags by charging them that extra money. And I don't know, maybe for from your own personal experience, you hear that a bag costs like 25 cents and you're like, "No, I'll just hold my items, like thank you." Like you decline the request for them to hand you a paper bag for 25 cents because I know I would do the same thing. I would not spend that extra cents on something that I'm just literally going to use for one time and throw it out. Um, so yeah, but this would cause people to take responsibility to bring their own reusable bags, in order to avoid paying the fee. And in the end, it would help to reduce plastic waste and create a more cleaner environment and teach individuals about the care for the world and responsibility. Now, to explain further why this would be a negative incentive is because it penalizes a certain type of behavior. So, mm, why this was even put into action is because people would litter and just throw plastic bags everywhere, and it would end up in the ocean and end up ending the lives of many sea creatures or sea animals. Um, so this is a negative incentive because it punishes people, whether you did do that, whether you ever did litter or not, but most of the majority of the people did and would, even if it was not on purpose. So it is a negative incentive because you're being forced to pay for those actions, which throwing away a plastic bag would be something negative for the environment. So that is why it's a negative incentive. Let's see. So yeah, but here are some basic examples that I provided of a positive incentive. So it's the benefit for taking a certain action. It provides benefit, but it would reward an individual for completing something beneficial. And then a negative incentive, on the other hand, would be like receiving a fine for speeding in a school zone, which is dangerous. So yeah, essentially positive incentives are something to reward an individual for completing something beneficial, and a negative incentive is something that would punish an individual, but also help to put an end to specific behavior or actions. Now, to conclude, um, today's presentation, I have covered the fact that spending creates income and drives growth, um, and keeps the economy flowing with the concept of one person's spending is another person's income. Secondly, I covered the opportunity cost concept, which reminds us to weigh the benefits of a situation behind every decision. So, opportunity cost is what you lose when choosing another option. Now, lastly, incentives explain why people and businesses act the way they do because incentive can be positive or negative, so and it can guide an individual's behavior or outcome. So together, these principles show us how economics connects everyday choices with the bigger picture.